The streets of Los Angeles glowed with the warmth of Christmas lights strung up in windows and around street lamps. It was the kind of night that made you feel like magic was just around the corner, if you were lucky enough to have a home to return to. Keanu Reeves sat in the back of a modest black car, staring out the window. The Christmas season had always brought mixed feelings for him. He loved the spirit of kindness it encouraged, but he couldn't ignore the suffering he saw around him. As his car rolled to a stop at a red light in a quieter part of downtown, he spotted something that made his heart sink. A little boy, no older than 8 or 9, sat on the curb, his arms wrapped around himself for warmth. His sneakers were too big for his feet, his thin jacket looked as though it had been through countless winters, and he shivered in the cold. Beside him, a woman, his mother, Keanu assumed, held a sign that read, "Homeless. Hungry. Please help." Keanu lowered the car window slightly, letting in the sharp chill of the night air. The boy's mother looked up, her expression tired but hopeful when she saw someone taking notice. Before Keanu could say anything, the light turned green, and the car moved forward. He turned to his driver. "Stop the car." "Sir," the driver asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. "Please," Keanu said softly but firmly. The driver pulled over to the side of the street. Keanu quickly stepped out of the car, walking back toward the boy and his mother. They didn't notice him at first, their attention focused on the sign and the occasional passerby who tossed them a few coins or muttered a hurried, "Merry Christmas." "Hi," Keanu said gently as he crouched down to meet the boy's eye level. The boy blinked at him, his large brown eyes wide with surprise. The mother straightened, wary but curious. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice quiet and cautious. Keanu smiled, his voice soft and steady. "I was going to ask you the same thing." The mother hesitated, clutching her son a little closer. "We're fine," she said quickly, though her trembling hands betrayed her words. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out a few folded bills. "Please, take this," he said, offering the money. The mother's eyes widened. "That's too much." "It's not," Keanu interrupted gently. "It's enough to get a warm meal and maybe a place to stay tonight." The boy tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mom, it's the guy from the movies," he whispered excitedly. Keanu chuckled softly. "You watch movies, huh?" The boy nodded. "I saw you in the one where you go really fast on a bus." "Speed," Keanu said with a smile. "That's a good one." The boy grinned for the first time, but his mother still looked unsure. She glanced at Keanu, her eyes filled with gratitude but also fear. "Why are you doing this?" Keanu's expression softened. "Because it's Christmas. And because I know how hard life can be sometimes. Everyone deserves a little help now and then." The woman hesitated, then finally reached out to take the money. "Thank you," she said, her voice cracking. "This means more than you know." Keanu smiled and reached into his coat pocket again, pulling out a small business card. "Here's my assistant's number. Call her tomorrow, and she'll help you find a more permanent solution, housing, work, whatever you need. You don't have to do this alone." The woman stared at the card as if it were a golden ticket. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Keanu replied. He stood up, giving the boy a quick wink. "Stay warm, okay?" As he walked back to the car, Keanu felt a strange mix of emotions, gratitude for being able to help, but also a gnawing sense that the encounter wasn't over. Something about the family stuck with him, like a puzzle missing a piece. And as his car pulled away, he didn't notice the shadowy figure watching from a distance, their face obscured but their eyes fixed intently on him and the little family. The wheels of something bigger had begun to turn, though Keanu couldn't possibly know it yet. That night, as the city lights twinkled in the distance, Keanu couldn't sleep. He sat by his window in his modest home, sipping a cup of tea as the events of the evening replayed in his mind. The boy's bright eyes, the mother's trembling hands, the gratitude in her voice, it all lingered with him. But it wasn't just the family's situation that unsettled him. It was the nagging feeling that something was wrong. Something more than hunger, more than homelessness. The mother's hesitation, her nervous glances, and the way she clutched her son protectively, it all hinted at something deeper. Keanu set his tea down and reached for his phone. He called his assistant, Clara, who answered groggily on the third ring. Keanu? It's past midnight. Is everything okay? I need a favor, Keanu said, his voice steady. Tomorrow, I want you to find out everything you can about shelters in downtown LA, ones that cater to families. Shelters? Clara asked, now fully awake. Why? Are you? There's a family I met tonight, Keanu interrupted gently. A mother and her son. I gave them your number, but I want to make sure they're okay. Can you look into it? Of course, Clara said without hesitation. I'll start first thing in the morning. Thank you, Keanu said. He hung up and leaned back in his chair, staring out at the city below. As he watched the quiet streets, a movement caught his eye. He leaned closer to the window, squinting into the dim light of the street lamp below. A figure was standing on the sidewalk across from his house, their face obscured by the hood of their jacket. Keanu's heart quickened. The figure didn't move, didn't approach, just stood there, watching. He got up, turning off the lights in his room to see more clearly. By the time he looked again, the figure was gone. The next morning, Keanu met Clara at his favorite coffee shop. She already had her laptop open, a list of shelters pulled up on the screen. Okay, she said as Keanu sat down. There are 6 shelters in the area where you said you saw them. I called 3 already, but none of them reported seeing a mother and son matching the description you gave me. I'm waiting to hear back from the others. Keanu nodded, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. If they didn't make it into a shelter, they might still be on the streets. Clara hesitated. Keanu, I know you want to help, but LA's a big city. They could be anywhere. And, she lowered her voice. You have that fundraiser for children's hospitals tonight. You don't want to miss that, it's important. I know it is, Keanu said. But this feels important too. Clara sighed, knowing better than to argue. Fine. If they didn't make it into a shelter, there's one other place they might have gone. There's a community kitchen a few blocks away from where you saw them. They serve breakfast every morning, no questions asked. Keanu's eyes lit up. Send me the address. The community kitchen was bustling with activity when Keanu arrived. The smell of fresh coffee and warm pancakes filled the air as volunteers in aprons rushed between tables, serving plates to people seated in neat rows. Keanu pulled his baseball cap lower over his head, hoping to avoid being recognized. He scanned the room, looking for any sign of the boy and his mother. Can I help you? A volunteer asked, smiling kindly at him. Keanu hesitated, then said, I'm looking for someone. A woman and her young son, dark hair, brown eyes, maybe about 8 or 9 years old. The volunteer's smile faded slightly. We've had a lot of families come through this morning. I think there was a woman with a boy who might match that description, but they left about an hour ago. Keanu's heart sank. Did she say where she was going? The volunteer shook her head. No, but she looked nervous. Like she was in a hurry to get somewhere. Keanu thanked her and stepped back outside, his mind racing. If the mother had been in a hurry, where could she have gone? As he stood there, trying to piece it together, he felt a tug on his sleeve. He turned to see a little girl holding a scruffy teddy bear, her big brown eyes looking up at him. You're the man from TV, she said matter-of-factly. Keanu crouched down, smiling gently. I've been on TV a couple of times, yeah. What's your name? Marisol, she said, hugging her teddy bear tightly. I saw you talking to Elijah's mom last night. Keanu's breath caught. You know Elijah? Marisol nodded. He's my friend. We used to play at the park. But now, she trailed off, looking down. Now what? Keanu prompted softly. They're hiding, Marisol whispered. Keanu's stomach tightened. Hiding from who? Marisol shrugged, her face scrunched in confusion. I don't know. Elijah's mom said it's not safe to talk to people. Keanu gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Do you know where they went? Marisol hesitated, then pointed down the street. Elijah said they were going to the old library. Keanu stood, his mind racing. He knew the place Marisol was talking about, a rundown, abandoned library that had become a shelter of sorts for people with nowhere else to go. Thank you, Marisol, he said with a warm smile. You've been a big help. As he hurried toward the library, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He glanced over his shoulder, but the street behind him was empty. Still, the hairs on the back of his neck prickled. Something wasn't right. The old library stood at the edge of the neighborhood, its grand stone facade now crumbling with age. The windows were boarded up, the once majestic front doors weathered and warped. A faded sign that read East Side Public Library hung above the entrance, barely legible under layers of graffiti. Keanu approached cautiously, his steps echoing faintly on the cracked pavement. The air felt heavier here, as though the building itself carried the weight of the lives it had sheltered. He pushed lightly on the door, and it creaked open, revealing the dim, dusty interior. Inside, the smell of old paper and damp wood filled the air. Bookshelves, now mostly empty, stood like skeletons of the library's former glory. Scattered among them were signs of life, blankets, shopping carts filled with belongings, and small clusters of people huddled in corners. Keanu scanned the room, searching for the mother and son he'd met the night before. As he moved deeper into the library, he caught the eye of a man sitting by a pile of blankets. The man looked up, his face wary. You lost? The man asked, his voice gruff. Keanu shook his head. I'm looking for a woman and her son. She has dark hair, and the boy's about 8 years old. They might have come here earlier today. The man's expression softened slightly. You mean Alana and Elijah? Keanu's heart leapt. Yes. Have you seen them? The man nodded. They were here earlier. She was real quiet, like she didn't want to be noticed. They stayed for a bit, but then some guys showed up asking questions. Keanu frowned. What kind of guys? The man lowered his voice. The kind you don't mess with. They came in looking for someone. Didn't say who, but Alana grabbed her boy and left before they could see her. Keanu's chest tightened. Do you know where she went? The man hesitated, then pointed toward the back of the library. There's an old storage room in the basement. Some folks hide out there when they don't feel safe upstairs. Keanu nodded in thanks and made his way toward the rear of the library. As he walked, his eyes darted to the shadows, his instincts sharp. The air was eerily still, but the feeling of being watched had returned. He reached the basement door, a heavy metal slab with peeling paint. He pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest. The stairs beyond were narrow and steep, leading down into near-total darkness. Keanu pulled out his phone, using its flashlight to illuminate the way. The basement was colder than the rest of the library, and the sound of dripping water echoed faintly in the distance. Alana? Keanu called softly. For a moment, there was no response. Then, from the far corner of the room, came a familiar voice. Who's there? Keanu angled his light toward the voice and saw Alana standing protectively in front of Elijah. The boy clung to her coat, his eyes wide with fear. It's me, Keanu said, lowering the light so it wasn't shining directly at them. It's okay. I'm here to help. Alana's shoulders relaxed slightly, but she still looked wary. "How did you find us?" "A friend," Keanu said, stepping closer. "Elijah's friend Marisol told me where to look." Elijah's face lit up at the mention of Marisol. "Marisol's okay." "She's fine," Keanu assured him. "She was worried about you." Alana sighed, her tension giving way to exhaustion. "I didn't want to come here, but I didn't know where else to go. They were looking for us." Keanu crouched down to meet Elijah's gaze. "Who's they? Who's after you?" Alana hesitated, glancing at her son before speaking. "I don't know their names, but they've been following us for weeks. I think they work for someone powerful." "Why are they following you?" Keanu asked gently. Alana took a deep breath, her voice trembling. "A few weeks ago, I saw something I wasn't supposed to. At first, I thought it was just a mistake, but then they started showing up wherever we went, watching us, asking questions. I've been trying to keep Elijah safe, but they won't stop." Keanu nodded, his mind racing. "What did you see?" Alana hesitated, her eyes darting toward Elijah. Before she could finish, the sound of footsteps echoed from upstairs. Alana's face went pale. "They're here," she whispered. Keanu motioned for them to stay quiet, his body tense. The footsteps grew louder, moving through the library with purpose. "Check every corner," a gruff voice barked. "She's here somewhere." Keanu quickly turned to Alana. "Stay here. Don't make a sound." "What are you going to do?" she whispered, panic creeping into her voice. "I'll distract them," Keanu said firmly. "Stay hidden until it's safe." Before Alana could protest, Keanu moved back toward the stairs. He crept up quietly, careful not to draw attention to himself. Peering through the crack in the door, he saw two men in dark jackets moving through the library, their eyes scanning every corner. "Find her," one of them growled. "The boss wants her brought in before tonight." Keanu's heart raced. He didn't know who these men were or who they worked for, but one thing was clear, they wouldn't stop until they found Alana and Elijah. Taking a deep breath, Keanu stepped out into the open, clearing his throat loudly. The men whipped around, their eyes narrowing as they saw him. "Hey," Keanu said casually, raising his hands in mock surrender. "You guys lost? The coffee shop's 2 blocks that way." The men exchanged a glance, their expressions hardening. "Who are you?" one of them asked. "Just someone who loves libraries," Keanu said, giving them a calm smile. "You should try reading sometime. It's good for the soul." The men didn't laugh. One of them took a step forward, his posture threatening. "We're looking for someone. A woman and a kid. You seen them?" Keanu tilted his head, feigning thought. Can't say I have. But if you're looking to check out a book, I think the Dewey Decimal System is still in play." The man growled, clearly running out of patience. "You think you're funny, huh?" "A little," Keanu admitted with a shrug. As the men moved closer, Keanu's mind raced. He needed to lead them away from the basement, and fast. "I'm guessing you're not here for the holiday book club," he said, stepping backward toward the door. "Shame. They're reading A Christmas Carol. You'd make a great Scrooge." The men glared at him, but they were following him now, just as he'd hoped. Keanu pushed open the door and stepped outside into the bright morning light. As the men followed him, he glanced back once, reassuring himself that Alana and Elijah were still safely hidden. He didn't know how this was going to end, but one thing was certain, he wasn't going to let those men anywhere near that family. Keanu stepped outside the library and into the sunlight, his breath visible in the chilly December air. The two men followed, their heavy boots crunching against the gravel. They were watching him closely, their suspicion growing with every step he took. Keanu kept his posture relaxed, his movements calm, as though he wasn't leading them on a wild goose chase away from Alana and Elijah. "Nice day, isn't it?" Keanu said, glancing back at the men with a faint smile. "Perfect weather for some fresh air." "Enough," one of them barked, clearly done with the banter. "You've got two options, pal. Either you tell us where the woman and the kid are, or—" Keanu held up his hands, cutting him off. "You're looking for a woman and a kid, huh? You know, I did see someone like that earlier." The second man narrowed his eyes. "Where?" Keanu motioned toward the far end of the block. They were heading that way. Looked like they were in a hurry. "If you're quick, you might catch them." The men exchanged a glance, then the first one turned back to Keanu, his expression skeptical. "Why are you helping us?" Keanu shrugged. "Because I'd rather you go bother someone else." "Now, are we done here?" The men hesitated for a moment longer before the first one finally growled, "Come on. If he's lying, we'll deal with him later." Keanu watched as they hurried off down the street, their attention fully diverted. He waited until they were out of sight before exhaling a quiet sigh of relief. Turning back toward the library, he slipped inside and closed the door behind him. In the basement, Alana and Elijah were exactly where he had left them, their faces tense with worry. When Keanu reappeared, Alana stood up quickly. "What happened? Are they gone?" Keanu nodded. "For now. I sent them in the wrong direction. But we need to get you out of here before they figure it out." Alana's face was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she held Elijah close. "They're not going to stop, are they?" Keanu crouched down beside her, his voice steady and reassuring. "I don't know who they are or why they're after you, but I do know this, you're not alone anymore. We'll figure this out together." Elijah looked up at Keanu, his small voice breaking the silence. "Are you going to keep us safe?" Keanu gave the boy a gentle smile. "I'll do everything I can. I promise." Alana bit her lip, her eyes brimming with tears. "I don't even know why you're helping us. You don't owe us anything." Keanu shook his head. "It's not about owing anyone. It's about doing what's right. And right now, what's right is making sure you two are safe." Alana hesitated, then nodded. "Okay. What do we do now?" Keanu thought for a moment. He needed a plan, something that would keep Alana and Elijah out of danger while also figuring out who these men were and why they were after her. Then, an idea struck him. "There's a friend of mine who runs a community center on the other side of town," he said. "It's a safe place for families who need help. I'll take you there." Alana hesitated. "What if they follow us?" "They won't," Keanu said confidently. "I'll make sure of it." The walk to the community center was long, but Keanu kept them moving through side streets and quiet alleys, avoiding main roads and open spaces. He had told Clara to meet them there, and he trusted that she'd already be working on the next steps to help Alana and Elijah. Along the way, Elijah tugged on Keanu's sleeve. "Mr. Keanu?" "Yeah, buddy?" Keanu asked, glancing down at the boy. "Are you a good guy?" Elijah asked earnestly. "Like in the movies?" Keanu smiled faintly. "I'm just a regular guy, Elijah. But I try to do good things when I can." The boy seemed to think about that for a moment, then nodded. "I think you're a good guy." Keanu ruffled the boy's hair gently. "Thanks, kid. That means a lot." When they finally reached the community center, Clara was already waiting outside, holding a clipboard and her ever-present tablet. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw the tired mother and son walking beside Keanu. "You weren't kidding," she said softly as they approached. "Keanu, what have you gotten yourself into?" "Just doing what needs to be done," Keanu replied. "Can you help them?" Clara nodded immediately. "Of course." "Alana, right?" she said, addressing the mother. I've already made arrangements for a room upstairs. It's private and secure, and there's a warm meal waiting for you. We'll get you whatever else you need. Alana looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. You did all that already? Clara smiled. It's what we do. You're safe here. As Clara led Alana and Elijah inside, Keanu lingered near the entrance, his mind still racing. He had gotten them out of immediate danger, but the bigger question remained, who were those men, and why were they after Alana? The memory of what Alana had said in the basement gnawed at him. I saw something I wasn't supposed to. Whatever she had seen, it had put a target on her back. And Keanu knew that the men wouldn't stop until they found her. Keanu, Clara said, stepping back outside after settling the family inside. This isn't just a random situation, is it? No, Keanu admitted. It's bigger than we thought. Clara frowned. What are you going to do? Keanu looked down the quiet street, his jaw tightening. I need to figure out who's behind this. And then what? Clara asked. Keanu turned back to her, his voice calm but determined. And then, we stop them. Keanu spent the next hour pacing outside the community center, his mind spinning. Alana and Elijah were safe for now, but he knew their safety was temporary unless he uncovered who was after them and why. The memory of Alana's trembling voice, confessing she had seen something, stuck in his mind like a splinter. Clara stepped out of the building, wrapping her coat tightly against the evening chill. They're settled in, she said. Elijah's already fallen asleep. Poor kid must have been exhausted. Keanu stopped pacing and turned to her. Thanks, Clara. I owe you. You owe me about 1,000 favors by now, Clara replied with a wry smile, but her expression quickly turned serious. What's next, Keanu? These people after her aren't just random thugs. They're organized. Keanu nodded. I know. Alana mentioned seeing something that scared her enough to keep her on the run. Whatever it is, it's the reason those men are after her. Clara frowned, her mind working. If we want to help her, we need to figure out what she knows. But if she's too scared to talk, maybe there's another way to dig into this. Keanu's brow furrowed. What are you thinking? I made some calls earlier, Clara said, pulling out her tablet. A contact of mine mentioned that there's been unusual activity in the area where you first met Alana and Elijah, downtown, near the old industrial district. A lot of blacked-out SUVs, people coming and going at odd hours, and shipments being moved late at night. Keanu crossed his arms, considering this. Could be tied to whoever's after her. If she saw something, it might have been related to that area. Clara nodded. There's a storage yard near 5th Street that's been flagged for suspicious activity. Might be worth checking out. Keanu hesitated, his protective instincts kicking in. I can't leave Alana and Elijah completely unprotected. They're safe here, Clara said firmly. The center has cameras, security locks, and trusted staff. No one gets in without being vetted. Besides, this place isn't on anyone's radar, not yet. You've got time to investigate. Keanu exhaled slowly. All right. The storage yard it is. I'll check it out. I'm coming with you, Clara said. Keanu raised an eyebrow. You don't need to get involved. It might get. Clara cut him off with a sharp look. Don't you dare say, dangerous. You think I've worked with you all these years and don't know what I'm signing up for. Besides, you'll need someone to handle logistics while you go full, whatever action movie mode you're about to do. Keanu chuckled despite himself. Fair enough. Let's go. The storage yard was as nondescript as it was foreboding, a cluster of rusted shipping containers stacked like building blocks, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. The only sign of activity was a lone guard patrolling the perimeter with a flashlight, his breath visible in the cold air. Clara parked the car a block away, and the two of them approached the yard on foot. She handed Keanu a pair of binoculars from her bag. "All right, Mr. Action Star, what do you see?" Keanu peered through the binoculars, scanning the yard. The containers looked ordinary enough, but his trained eye caught subtle signs that this wasn't a normal operation. One of the containers had a padlock that looked newer than the others. A set of tire tracks in the dirt suggested a vehicle had been there recently. "There's something going on here," Keanu said, lowering the binoculars. Clara pulled out her tablet and tapped at the screen. "I hacked into the city's records earlier, don't ask me how, and this storage yard is technically abandoned. It hasn't been leased or used for years. Whatever's happening here isn't legal." Keanu nodded. "Let's get a closer look." They crept along the fence line, staying low and out of sight. The guard's flashlight beam passed over the ground near them, but they stayed in the shadows. Keanu motioned for Clara to stay back as he reached a small gap in the fence where the chain link had been cut and hastily patched with loose wires. Keanu slipped through the gap first, then helped Clara through. The two of them crouched behind a stack of wooden pallets, the storage yard now eerily quiet except for the distant hum of the city. "What now?" Clara whispered. Keanu pointed toward the container with the newer padlock. "That one. Whatever they're protecting is in there." Clara frowned. "And how exactly do you plan to open it? Pick the lock with your charisma?" Keanu smiled faintly. "Something like that." As they moved closer to the container, they heard a faint noise, voices, low and urgent, coming from somewhere nearby. Keanu froze, holding up a hand to stop Clara. Two men appeared from behind another stack of containers, deep in conversation. "I'm telling you, we've got to move the shipment tonight," one of them said. "The boss wants it out of here before anyone else catches wind." "And what about the woman?" the other man asked. Keanu's heart skipped a beat. "The boss doesn't care what happens to her," the first man replied. "We just need to make sure she doesn't talk." "And that kid? He's leverage." Clara's eyes widened, and she whispered, "They're talking about Alana." Keanu's jaw tightened. He motioned for Clara to stay hidden as the two men walked past, their voices fading into the distance. Once they were gone, Keanu turned to Clara. "They're planning something big," he said quietly. "And they know where Alana is. We don't have much time." Clara looked worried. "We need to get out of here and warn the center." "Not yet," Keanu said. "I need to see what's inside that container." Clara hesitated but nodded. "Okay. But make it quick." Keanu approached the container, scanning it for any signs of alarms or hidden traps. The padlock was sturdy, but the hinges looked rusted. He grabbed a crowbar lying nearby, likely left behind by whoever worked here, and wedged it against the edge of the container's door. With a sharp grunt of effort, Keanu pried the door open just enough to peek inside. What he saw made his blood run cold. Stacks of unmarked crates filled the container, their tops stenciled with words that read, "Hazardous materials," and "Handle with care." But what caught his attention most was a small black duffel bag resting on top of one of the crates. Keanu reached in and grabbed the bag, unzipping it quickly. Inside were papers, maps, and what looked like blueprints of the downtown area. Scanning the documents, Keanu's eyes locked on one word circled in bold red ink: explosion. "They're planning something," he muttered. Before he could look further, Clara's voice hissed from behind him. "Keanu! The guard's coming back." Keanu quickly zipped the bag and slipped it over his shoulder. "Let's go." They moved quickly and quietly, slipping back through the gap in the fence just as the guard's flashlight swept over the container. Back at the car, Clara turned to Keanu, her face pale. "What did you find?" "Proof," Keanu said grimly. "They're planning something dangerous. And now that they know Alana's nearby, they won't stop until they get her." Clara's voice was laced with fear. What are we going to do? Keanu looked at her, his eyes steely with determination. We're going to stop them. And we're going to protect Alana and Elijah, no matter what. Keanu and Clara sped back to the community center, the duffel bag sitting ominously in the back seat. The weight of what they had uncovered hung heavy between them. Neither spoke, both deep in thought. Keanu's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as Clara stared at the blueprints she had pulled from the bag. This isn't just dangerous, Clara finally said, her voice uneasy. It's catastrophic. They're planning something huge, and it's happening soon. Keanu nodded grimly. And they won't stop until they silence Alana. She knows something that ties back to all of this. Clara traced a finger over the map. This circled location, it's an old transit hub downtown. If I'm reading this right, they're using it as a staging area for whatever they're planning. But why? What's the target? We'll figure it out, Keanu said. But first, we have to make sure Alana and Elijah are completely safe. When they arrived at the community center, Keanu parked in the alley out back, taking extra care to ensure they hadn't been followed. Clara grabbed the duffel bag, and the two of them slipped inside through the rear entrance. The center was quiet now, most of the families tucked away in their rooms for the night. Clara gestured toward a small conference room, and they ducked inside to go over their next steps. Alana was sitting in a corner of the room when Keanu asked to see her, Elijah asleep on a makeshift cot beside her. She looked up at Keanu, worry etched deep into her face. You're back, she said quietly. What's going on? Keanu sat down across from her, speaking gently to avoid alarming her. We went to the storage yard. The people looking for you, they're planning something dangerous. And they think you're a threat to their plans. Alana's face went pale, her hands gripping the edge of her chair. I told you, I don't even know what I saw. It wasn't supposed to matter. Keanu leaned forward, his voice steady. But it does matter, Alana. Whatever you saw scared them enough to chase you all over this city. Think back, what was it? Anything you can remember might help us stop them. Alana hesitated, her gaze shifting to Elijah. Her voice dropped to a whisper. It was a few weeks ago. Elijah and I were walking near the old transit hub downtown. We'd heard there were volunteers giving out food and supplies. But when we got there, I saw these men unloading crates from trucks. I thought they were just donations at first, but the way they were acting, they were tense, like they didn't want anyone near them. She paused, swallowing hard. I hid behind a corner, but I could hear them talking. One of them said something about a delivery that had to be handled before the holidays. Another one mentioned the word timers. That's when I realized whatever was in those crates wasn't food. Clara's eyes widened. Timers? That's not good. Keanu nodded. They're moving explosives. The blueprints we found at the yard confirm it. They're planning an attack, something big. Alana covered her mouth with her hands, her voice trembling. I never meant to overhear them. I grabbed Elijah and ran, but one of them must have seen us. Since then, they've been following us, trying to keep me quiet. Keanu placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You did the right thing by running, Alana. And now, we're going to make sure they don't find you again. Keanu and Clara spent the next hour fortifying the community center. They spoke to the staff, ensuring that only trusted people were allowed inside, and reviewed the security cameras and door locks. Alana and Elijah were moved to a private room on the second floor, where they could be easily monitored. All right, Clara said as she double-checked the center's surveillance system. They should be safe here for now. Keanu nodded, but his expression was far from relaxed. We can't just sit back and wait for them to make their next move. If we want to stop them, we need to go to the source. You mean the transit hub? Clara asked. Exactly, Keanu said. If that's where they're staging everything, we might find more information, and a way to stop them. Clara frowned. You're going back out there, aren't you? I have to, Keanu said. The longer we wait, the closer they get to whatever they're planning. And if we don't act now, a lot of innocent people could get hurt. Clara sighed, grabbing her coat. Well, you're not going alone. Let me grab a flashlight and my tablet. You don't have to come, Clara, Keanu said. Yeah, well, someone has to make sure you don't do anything crazy, she replied, smirking faintly. Besides, I'm not letting you have all the fun. Keanu smiled, grateful for her unwavering support. All right. Let's go. The transit hub was eerily quiet when they arrived, the massive concrete structure shrouded in shadows. Once a bustling center of public transportation, it had been shut down years ago and now sat abandoned, a perfect hiding place for people who didn't want to be found. Keanu and Clara parked a safe distance away and approached on foot, staying low and out of sight. As they crept closer, they spotted movement near one of the loading bays, a group of men unloading crates from the back of a truck. There they are, Clara whispered. Keanu nodded, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. Looks like they're still setting up. This might be our only chance to figure out what they're planning. Clara pulled out her tablet, syncing it with a pair of wireless cameras she had brought along. I'll set up surveillance near the entrance. If they leave any clues behind, we'll have it on video. Keanu gave her a quick nod. Be careful. As Clara moved to set up the cameras, Keanu slipped around the side of the building, staying in the shadows. He needed to get closer, to overhear what the men were saying. Peering around a corner, Keanu watched as the men unloaded the last of the crates. One of them opened a crate and pulled out what looked like a sophisticated timer attached to a bundle of wires. The boss says this has to go off tomorrow night, one of the men said. Right in the middle of the holiday event downtown. Maximum impact. Keanu's chest tightened. Downtown was hosting its annual Christmas celebration tomorrow night. Thousands of families would be there to enjoy the lights, music, and festivities. This wasn't just about Alana anymore. This was about saving countless lives. Keanu slipped back into the shadows, his jaw set. He had everything he needed, the time, the location, and the plan. Now, he just had to stop it. Keanu's heart pounded as he crouched behind the wall of the transit hub, the men's chilling words ringing in his ears. Tomorrow night. Maximum impact. He didn't need to hear any more to understand the gravity of the situation. Thousands of families were at risk during the city's Christmas celebration, children, parents, grandparents. The thought of it being turned into a nightmare ignited a fire inside him. He slipped back to where Clara was setting up the surveillance cameras. She looked up as he approached, her brow furrowed. Did you hear anything? They're planning to set off explosives at the Christmas event downtown tomorrow night, Keanu said, his voice low but urgent. We need to act now. Clara's face paled. Tomorrow night? That's not enough time to get the police involved, they'll want evidence, and we don't have much beyond what we overheard. Then we'll stop them ourselves, Keanu said, his tone firm. Clara blinked. Stop them ourselves. Keanu, you're amazing, but you're also not actually an action hero. These people are dangerous. What are you thinking? Keanu thought for a moment. They're using the transit hub as a staging area. If we can disrupt their operation, remove their equipment, disable the explosives, they won't have time to regroup before tomorrow night. We just need to stay one step ahead of them. Clara sighed but nodded, her determination matching his. All right. If you're in, I'm in. But we're going to need a plan, and maybe a little luck. Before they could begin, Clara's tablet buzzed with a notification. She glanced at the screen and frowned. Hold on. One of the cameras I just set up is picking up movement by the back entrance. Keanu leaned over to look. The screen showed a grainy image of a figure slipping into the building, their face obscured by a hoodie. Wait, Clara said, zooming in. That's not one of the men we saw earlier. It's someone else. Keanu studied the footage closely. The figure moved with purpose, like they knew the layout of the hub. Whoever they weren't stumbling into this by accident. We need to see who that is, Keanu said. Clara hesitated. You think it's one of their guys? Maybe, Keanu said. Or maybe it's someone who knows what's going on. The two of them moved carefully through the shadows of the hub, making their way toward the back entrance. Keanu's footsteps were silent as he led the way, his senses sharp. The figure from the camera was just ahead, moving deeper into the building. When they rounded a corner, Keanu stepped into the open and called out, "Hey!" The figure froze, then spun around. To Keanu's surprise, it was someone he recognized, Lila, the mysterious woman who had helped him fend off the gang in the alley a few nights ago. Lila narrowed her eyes, lowering her hood. "Reeves? What are you doing here?" Keanu asked, his voice tinged with surprise. "I could ask you the same thing," Lila shot back. "This isn't exactly your usual Hollywood hangout." Clara stepped forward, her voice sharp. "We're trying to stop these people. Do you know what they're planning?" Lila sighed, crossing her arms. "Yeah, I know. I've been following these guys for weeks. They're part of a bigger network, and this is just one piece of the puzzle. They're moving explosives, weapons, you name it. Tomorrow night's attack is meant to be a show of power." Keanu frowned. "Why are you following them? Are you with law enforcement?" Lila shook her head. "Not exactly. Let's just say I've got personal reasons for wanting to shut them down." Clara looked skeptical. "How do we know we can trust you?" Lila smirked faintly. "If I wanted to stop you, I would have done it already." Keanu studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. We're on the same side, then. What do you know about their operation here?" "They're keeping the explosives in a secure room near the loading dock," Lila said. "But it's guarded, and they've rigged the place with alarms. If we're going to disable the explosives, we'll have to do it carefully." Clara pulled up the blueprints on her tablet. "If we can access the loading dock through this side corridor, we might be able to get close without setting off any alarms." Lila raised an eyebrow. "Not bad, tech girl." Clara rolled her eyes. "Thanks, I think." Keanu nodded. "Let's move." The trio moved carefully through the labyrinth of hallways and corridors, each step bringing them closer to the loading dock. The tension was palpable, but Keanu felt a strange sense of calm. He wasn't an action hero, but he was no stranger to pressure. And right now, his focus was on protecting the people who were counting on him, Alana, Elijah, and everyone else who would be at the Christmas event tomorrow night. When they reached the loading dock, they peered around the corner and saw two men standing guard near a steel door. Beyond them, faint voices and the sound of equipment being moved echoed through the space. Lila leaned in close. "We take out the guards quietly, get inside, and disable the explosives." "Sound good?" Keanu nodded. "Let's keep it quiet." Clara stayed back, her fingers flying over her tablet as she worked to disable any nearby alarms. "Give me 30 seconds, she whispered. The guards were distracted, talking to each other as Lila and Keanu crept forward. Lila moved with the precision of someone who had done this before, her steps silent as a shadow. Keanu followed her lead, his movement steady and deliberate. When they were close enough, Lila tapped one guard on the shoulder, drawing his attention just long enough to knock him out with a swift, calculated move. Keanu quickly grabbed the second guard, gently but firmly disarming him and easing him to the ground. "Not bad, Reeves," Lila whispered, smirking. "Thanks," Keanu replied. "Let's get inside." Inside the steel door, the room was packed with crates, wires, and equipment. At the center of the room was a large table with several devices lined up, each one fitted with a digital timer. The timers were set for exactly 7 p.m. tomorrow night, the start of the Christmas event. Clara stepped inside, her eyes widening. This is it. This is everything. Lila nodded, scanning the room. We need to disable these timers. If we can't, we'll have to get this whole shipment out of here before they realize we've been here. Keanu turned to Clara. Can you disable them? Clara bit her lip, studying the devices. Maybe. But I'll need time. And if we trip anything, they'll know we're here. Do your best, Keanu said. We'll watch your back. As Clara worked, Keanu and Lila kept an eye on the door. Every second felt like an eternity, the weight of what they were doing pressing down on them. Finally, Clara exhaled, a small smile breaking across her face. Got it. The timers are offline. These explosives aren't going anywhere. Keanu nodded, relief washing over him. But before they could celebrate, the sound of voices echoed down the hallway. They're coming back, Lila hissed. Keanu's jaw tightened. Then we make sure they don't catch us. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the hallway outside the steel door, growing louder with each passing second. Keanu, Clara, and Lila exchanged tense glances as they realized the men guarding the explosives were returning, and they weren't alone. They're bringing backup, Lila whispered, her tone sharp. She glanced at Clara. Is there any way to lock this door from the inside? Clara quickly scanned the locking mechanism but shook her head. No. It's a manual lock, and they've got the key. Keanu didn't hesitate. Then we don't wait for them to get here. We slip out before they even know we're inside. Clara grabbed her tablet and shoved it into her bag while Lila checked the room for anything they might have missed. The timers were disabled, but the explosives and equipment were still there, scattered across the crates like silent threats. We need to move now, Keanu said, gesturing for them to follow. The trio slipped out of the steel door and into the maze of containers and machinery. They moved quickly but quietly, their footsteps muffled by the concrete floor. The voices of the returning men were close now, laced with frustration. They were supposed to stay on watch. Where are they? One man barked. They couldn't have gone far, another growled. Check the loading dock. Lila glanced over her shoulder as they rounded a corner. They're fanning out. If we're not careful, they'll box us in. Clara's voice was hushed but frantic. We need an exit. Now. Keanu scanned the area, his sharp eyes searching for a way out. Then he spotted it, a side door, partially hidden behind a stack of empty crates. There, he whispered, pointing. Let's go. The three of them darted toward the door, staying low to avoid being seen. Just as they reached it, the sound of a flashlight beam clicked on behind them, sweeping the area. Hey! Who's there? Keanu froze for a split second, his heart pounding. Lila grabbed the door handle and opened it just wide enough for them to slip through. Go, she hissed. Clara ducked through first, followed by Keanu, then Lila. Once they were outside, Lila pulled the door shut as quietly as possible. The air was cold and sharp, and the alley behind the building was empty. Keanu motioned for them to move quickly, leading them away from the transit hub and back toward the safety of the car. As they ran, Clara glanced back nervously. Do you think they'll notice what we did? Lila smirked faintly. Oh, they'll notice. The second they check those timers, they'll know someone's been in there. We've bought ourselves some time, but not much. Keanu nodded, his mind racing. Then we use that time to warn the city. We have to stop this before they find another way to carry out their plan. Back at the car, Clara immediately pulled out her tablet and began typing furiously. I'm sending anonymous tips to the city's emergency response team. If we give them enough intel about the explosives and the transit hub, they'll have to investigate. Keanu glanced at her. Can you make it sound urgent without tipping off the people at the hub? Already on it, Clara said, her fingers flying over the keys. I'm using a dummy email and rerouting it through 3 servers. No one will trace it back to us. Lila leaned against the car, watching the street for any signs of pursuit. If the city shuts down the Christmas celebration, those guys will know someone's onto them. They'll scatter, and they'll probably come after Alana and Elijah to clean up loose ends. Keanu's jaw tightened. Then we make sure they don't get that chance. Clara looked up from her tablet. We can warn the city and stall the bad guys, but we'll still need hard evidence to tie this back to whoever's pulling the strings. Otherwise, they'll just regroup and try again. Lila nodded. She's right. Disabling the timers was a good start, but it's not enough to stop them permanently. We need to go after their leader. Keanu frowned. Do we know who their leader is? Lila smirked faintly. Oh, I have a pretty good idea. His name's Victor Crane. He's been running these kinds of operations for years, arms deals, smuggling, anything that makes him money. If this plan goes through, it'll solidify his reputation and make him untouchable. Clara's eyes widened. Victor Crane. I've heard of him. He's been linked to all kinds of criminal activity, but no one's ever been able to pin anything on him. He's got half the city in his pocket. Keanu's gaze hardened. Then it's time someone stopped him. Lila pulled out her phone, tapping at the screen until a map appeared. Crane's been using a luxury high-rise downtown as his base of operations. He owns the whole building, top to bottom. If we want to find anything tying him to this, that's where we need to go. Keanu nodded. What's the plan? Lila grinned. The good news is, Crane's confident. He doesn't think anyone would dare come after him. His security's tight, but it's designed to keep out gangs, not people like us. And the bad news? Clara asked. The bad news is, if we get caught, we'll never make it out, Lila said bluntly. Clara winced. Great. Love those odds. Keanu's voice was calm but firm. We'll be careful. If Crane's connected to the explosives, we'll find proof, and we'll shut him down before he can hurt anyone. The trio arrived at the high-rise under the cover of darkness. The building towered above them, its sleek glass facade reflecting the city lights. Lila led the way, using a set of fake credentials to access a maintenance entrance at the back of the building. Inside, the atmosphere was cold and sterile, the faint hum of security cameras filling the air. Clara stayed close to Keanu, her tablet in hand as she hacked into the building's surveillance system. I'm in, she whispered. I've looped the camera feeds on the top 3 floors. As long as we stay quiet, they won't see us coming. Lila smirked. Not bad, tech girl. They moved quickly and quietly, taking the service elevator up to the top floor. When the doors opened, they were met with a sprawling, opulent office space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city, but Keanu's focus was on the desk at the center of the room. There, Lila said, nodding toward a sleek laptop sitting on the desk. If Crane's involved in this, his files will prove it. Clara rushed to the desk and plugged her tablet into the laptop. This'll take a minute, she said, her fingers flying over the screen. Keanu and Lila stood guard, their ears tuned to any sound of approaching footsteps. Suddenly, Clara gasped. Oh no. What is it? Keanu asked. Clara turned the tablet toward him, her face pale. He's already moving the backup plan. They've got a second shipment ready, and it's headed to the Christmas celebration right now. Keanu's chest tightened. How do we stop it? Lila's eyes narrowed. We take the fight straight to Crane. His city glowed with holiday lights as Keanu, Lila, and Clara stood at the edge of the grand Christmas celebration downtown. The crowd was enormous, families bundled in scarves and coats, children laughing as they clutched hot cocoa, and carolers singing under the twinkle of string lights. The festive scene felt like a dream, but Keanu couldn't focus on the joy surrounding him. He knew the danger lurking beneath it all. Victor Crane's plan was still in motion. While they had disrupted the main operation at the transit hub, a second shipment of explosives had been sent ahead. Somewhere in this sea of innocent faces was the location of the backup device, and they only had minutes to stop it. Clara worked furiously on her tablet, scanning the city's security network. The blueprints I pulled from Crane's files show 2 potential locations for the device, one near the stage by the Christmas tree, and the other near the food court. If we split up, we might be able to find it in time. Lila nodded, already pulling out her small baton. I'll take the stage. Crowds make it easy for people to slip something in unnoticed. If it's there, I'll find it. Keanu gestured toward Clara. You stay here and keep monitoring the cameras. If either of us finds something, you'll need to guide us out fast. What about you? Clara asked. Keanu looked toward the bustling food court, where families sat at picnic tables eating gingerbread cookies and candy canes. I'll check there. Let's move. Keanu weaved through the crowd, his sharp eyes scanning every corner of the food court. The smell of roasted chestnuts and peppermint filled the air, but his focus was laser-sharp. He examined trash bins, table legs, and vendor carts, looking for anything out of place. As he passed a small stand selling hot cider, he noticed something strange, a large, nondescript duffel bag wedged beneath the cart. It didn't match the festive decorations around it, and its placement seemed deliberate. Keanu crouched down, pretending to tie his shoe, and unzipped the bag just enough to confirm his suspicions. Inside was a device covered in wires and a blinking light. This was it. His heart pounded as he zipped the bag back up and tapped his earpiece. Clara, I found it. Food court. It's under the cider stand. Clara's voice crackled in his ear. Okay, hang on, don't touch it. I'm sending you instructions on how to disarm it. Just hold on. Keanu glanced at the crowd around him, families laughing and children chasing each other. There wasn't much time. If someone else spotted the bag, it could create a panic. Suddenly, a voice behind him froze him in place. Step away from the bag. Keanu turned slowly to see Victor Crane himself, flanked by 2 men in dark coats. Crane's eyes gleamed with cold amusement as he stepped closer, his hands tucked casually into his expensive overcoat. Well, Crane said with a smirk. Hollywood's favorite hero, sticking his nose where it doesn't belong. Keanu stood, his posture calm but his muscles coiled like a spring. It's over, Crane. We've already stopped your main operation. Walk away while you still can. Crane chuckled, shaking his head. You don't get it, do you? This isn't about money or power. This is about control. Fear is the most valuable commodity in the world. And tonight, I was going to show this city just how fragile their little holiday cheer really is. Keanu's voice was firm. Not tonight. Not ever. Crane nodded to his men, who started advancing. I was going to let this play out cleanly, but now it looks like I'll have to make an example of you. But before they could take another step, a voice rang out from behind them. Hey, buddy, looks like you're outnumbered. Crane spun around just in time to see Lila drop down from a decorative archway, landing a solid kick on one of his men. The other man lunged at her, but she spun around him with practiced ease, disarming him in seconds. Crane backed up, his confidence faltering as Lila smirked. You really should hire better help. Keanu stepped forward, closing the distance between him and Crane. It's over, he repeated, his voice steady. Crane sneered, his hands twitching as if considering his next move. But before he could act, Clara's voice came through Keanu's earpiece. Keanu, the timer's running faster than I thought. You've got less than 2 minutes. Keanu's heart skipped a beat. Clara, can you guide me through disarming it? No time, Clara said, her voice panicked. You need to get the bag out of the crowd now. Keanu didn't hesitate. He grabbed the duffel bag and sprinted away from the food court, weaving through the crowd as he searched for an open space. Keanu! Lila called, running after him. What's the plan? I'm making this city's biggest Christmas delivery. Keanu shouted over his shoulder. The nearest open space was the city's outdoor ice rink, where a few people were still skating under the glow of Christmas lights. Keanu burst onto the scene, shouting, "Clear the rink. Now!" People stared at him for a moment, confused, but Lila quickly followed, waving her arms. Everyone off. Emergency. Move. The skaters scrambled off the ice as Keanu sprinted to the center of the rink, the bag bouncing against his side. He dropped it on the ice and took a step back, his breath visible in the cold air. Clara's voice crackled in his ear. Keanu, you need to get out of there. The signal is still active, it could blow any second. Keanu turned to Lila, who was standing at the edge of the rink. Lila, get everyone back. Go. What about you? She shouted. I've got this. Keanu called back. Lila hesitated for a moment, then nodded, her trust in him clear. She turned and started clearing the remaining crowd from the area. Keanu knelt by the bag, his hands steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. He carefully unzipped it, revealing the blinking timer. The countdown read 0:20. Clara, what do I do? He asked. Clara's voice was frantic. There should be a blue wire and a red wire, cut the blue one. Keanu grabbed the small multi-tool Lila had handed him earlier and reached for the wires. His fingers brushed against them when the timer stopped. Keanu froze, staring at the display. The countdown was frozen at 0:02. What just happened? He asked, his voice shaking slightly. Clara's voice came through, filled with relief. I don't know how, but someone remotely disabled the device. The signal just cut out. Keanu exhaled a shaky breath and zipped the bag back up. It's over. As Keanu stepped off the ice, Lila ran up to him, her expression a mix of relief and disbelief. You're insane, you know that. Keanu chuckled softly. I've been told. Suddenly, Clara's voice came through again. Guys? You're not going to believe this. What is it? Keanu asked. I just got an alert from a private server. Someone sent me a file, coordinates, names, the entire network tied to Victor Crane. It's enough to shut him down for good. Keanu frowned. Who sent it? Clara paused. It's anonymous. But the message says, sometimes good deeds inspire others. Merry Christmas. Keanu and Lila exchanged a look. Somewhere, someone had been watching, and decided to step in. Later that night, Keanu returned to the community center, where Alana and Elijah were waiting. He knelt down in front of Elijah, who hugged him tightly. You're like a real superhero. Elijah said, his eyes shining. Keanu smiled warmly. No, buddy. I'm just someone who cares. Alana stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Thank you. For everything. Keanu nodded. You're safe now. And you're not alone anymore. As the clock struck midnight, Keanu looked out the window at the Christmas lights twinkling in the distance. Despite the danger and chaos, the night had brought something beautiful, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope and kindness could light the way. And for Keanu, that was the real Christmas miracle. The end.